It's a pleasant Wednesday morning right here in the city of Lagos. Good morning and welcome to the newspaper review segment on AM Cafe, where we take a review of the stories making the front pages of the national dailies. My name is Folashade Ogurinde. I'm with my esteemed colleague this morning, Faith. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you too?
I'm fine, thank you.
Well, welcome to the Lagos studios. My name is Faith Agbetuya. And this morning, I'll be reviewing the Guardian newspaper, the Nation newspaper, and some business stories. But then let's go first with what the Vanguard newspaper has for us this morning.
All right, the Vanguard this morning is reporting with the story, Ruga Buhari should have lost at the polls, says Soyinka, with the riders adds it's explosive. No society where cattle takes priority over humans. Benue government heads to Supreme Court. Falana urges compliance with Supreme Court ruling. No land for Ruga year. Rivers NNC wants South Ondo governors. Ruga policy unsettling Nigeria, says Bode George. All the stories are on page 5 of the Vanguard newspaper. Other stories here, how financial demands made Abiola allows associates serve Abacha. That statement was made by Oshoba. And you can find the story on page 11 of the Vanguard newspaper. Other stories making the front pages of the Vanguard here. My second-term team must be formidable. That statement was made by Buhari, and that story is on page 9 of the Vanguard newspaper. With regards to the Apapa Oshodi Expressway issue, miscreants take over my 2 tin can. That story is on page 10 of the Vanguard newspaper. I won't accept adversarial rancorous Senate, says Lawan. Wari didn't announce principal officer, says Bajame Amila. That story is on page 8 of the Vanguard newspaper. Just above the masthead, the story says violence cause of inconclusive elections in Nigeria, says INEC, with the request case files from police to prosecute offenders. That story is on page 8 of the Vanguard newspaper. And with regards to business stories, foreign investments into Nigeria rise by 34% in fourth quarter of 2019. That story is on page 19 of the Vanguard newspaper. So let's move on now to the Guardian newspaper.
And on the Guardian newspaper this morning, we have foreign airlines shun Nigeria's airspace over safety concerns. We have riders to that story. Operators blame poor communication on qualified traffic controllers. We are restructuring airspace to end challenges, says NAMA. And House of Reps tasked aviation agencies on standard. Safe travel in Nigeria's airspace is in jeopardy despite efforts by government to improve navigation infrastructure. Pilots are increasingly getting worried about poor communication between cockpits and control towers, a persistent program that has now worsened. Experts also expressed fear over increased possibilities of near misses and collisions between 2 or more operating aircraft. That's on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. We have more stories on that paper. Why we won't allow Zainab Aliyu's case swept on the carpet. That's coming from the Senate, and it's on page 4 of the Guardian newspaper if you just want to see what the Senate is actually saying there. We have on page 7 of the Guardian, Abdullahi Yahya emerges majority leader as Senate announces principal officers. And we have on page 11 of the Guardian, reconstruction resumes on Lagos Badagry Highway. We have more stories on the Guardian. Government encourages headers impunity, says Soyinka. We have riders, Rivers Taraba, others kick against policy as Oyo urges sincerity. FG Woo's Benue Youth says scheme not different from livestock plan. We have the coming from all of that coming from Wole Soyinka, and that story is on page 6 of the Guardian news if you really want to see what that is all about. We have more stories on that paper. Vandals cripple national economy further with $2 billion oil revenue loss on page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. More on that paper, why my policies programs are unpopular by Buhari on page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. Well, many Nigerians are saying the programs and policies of President Muhammadu Buhari are unpopular. But then he has come out to say, well, these are reasons why some persons are saying my policies and programs are not popular. If you really are curious to see details of that story, you can go on to page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. Nigeria rekindles rivalry with Cameroon in round of 16. That's in the Guardian Sport on page 43 to 46 and the back page of the Guardian newspaper. Well, let's see what Nigerian Tribune is reporting on its front page this morning.
All right, the Nigerian Tribune this morning is reporting Buhari should have lost last election over herdsmen crisis, says Soyinka with the riders, says Ruga settlement would set Nigeria on fire. Taraba Rivers Ijaw youths oppose scheme. My re-election reflects people's will. I won't fail them, says Buhari. That story is on page 9 of the Nigerian Tribune. Just above the masthead here, a maritime story says maritime workers begin strike today, shuts down seaports nationwide. If you look at the details of the story, it was stated that most of the dock workers were not being paid their wages and salaries, and that's the reason for the strike, which has commenced today. That story is on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune and continued on page 10 of the Nigerian Tribune. Historia says 10 million Nigerian children out of school, says Lawan, announces Senate's principal officers. That story is on page 2 of the Nigerian Tribune. Oyo technically bankrupt, Makinde says. He also pulls out of coalition that was by Lenehi, and that story is on page 12, page 32 and page 34 of the Nigerian Tribune. Anger as senator assaults saleswoman in Abuja. That story is on page 7. 4 companies appeal for future order of Patience Jonathan's $8.4 million and 7.4 billion naira. That story is on page 29 of the Nigerian Tribune. Just below the masthead, there's a picture here with the heading, with the tag, District Head of Douara, Alhaji Wuse Umar, with the Inspector General of Police, IGP Intelligence Response Team, after being rescued from his abductors on Tuesday. Moving on, Buhari's ADC's father-in-law rescued after 2 months in kidnappers' den. That's correlating with the picture on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune. That story is on page 30 of the same newspaper. That's what we have on the Nigerian Tribune, but I find the statement, by Soyinka quite interesting, and because of the heated the political climate right now in Nigeria is really heated because of the issue of the Ruga settlement. Some security experts or some political persons have felt that this is not the right policy. And Soyinka, who of course is a notable person in Nigeria, is saying that this would cause mayhem in Nigeria because the plan says they would permanently
remain in those
exactly. And someone also analyzed it online yesterday, saying that that there's more to it because people still bank on the Fulanization agenda, and tracing back to what Obasanjo said, that Nigerians should be on the watch out. There's an agenda to Fulanize Nigeria. There are many many sides to the stories, but right now it seems this policy is a bit unpopular to the Nigerian people. But let's move on now to the Nation newspaper. And
the Nation newspaper has it that Soyinka cattle colonies can set Nigeria on fire. Rivers reject policy. Plateau PDP, Beram community tackled along. I think that there is going to be trouble if this Ruga thing is not handled imaginatively with humanity as priority. If you really want to see who has said that, you can go on to page 6 of the Nation newspaper. And just like we had on the Nigerian Tribune, we have pictures of the magazine of Douara, Alhaji Umar, with some members of the special forces after he was released yesterday. Well, it's been two months. Buhari's ADC's father-in-law had been in abduction in the den of his abductors, but then he was released yesterday, and the news was all around that we have people.
Now, according to the tagging of newspapers, not that he was rescued, but we really don't know the details. Was a ransom paid?
That most times when you hear the news of some persons have been abducted, been released, you have ransoms being paid, and then you will have the Nigeria police coming out to say,
but interestingly,
we don't know if a ransom was paid and all of that. But then you will still see it in newspaper that these persons pay ransoms, but then I think people who are abducted should actually be released. or got rescued from the abductors without having
and you know, public opinion would say if the average Nigerian would feel that if Buhari's father-in-law could be abducted, what more is, you know, the fate of the
common man in Nigeria.
Exactly. And the driver who was abducted, kidnapped, that Akure Ikere road is still, you know, is still missing. So and also the other passengers too.
There was even a news yesterday going around that he had been released, but then that some amount of money were paid, millions of naira was paid to get the man out of the den of his abductors. Well, move away from that story onto it was risky funding Nadeco, says Oshoba. That's on page 46 of the Nation newspaper. Kalu borrow fees, others are Senate officers. On page 6 of the Nation newspaper. Kwara workers on EFCC searchlights. On page 42 of the Nation newspaper, we have Makinde or you're technically bankrupt. On page 38 of the Nation newspaper. Lagarde quits IMF for European Bank. On page 7 of the Nation newspaper. Jonathan's wife goes to appeal court. We have that on page 8 of the Nation newspaper. We know there is this news also that Jonathan's wife's properties had been impounded and all of that. But then she's moving on to the appeal court. So Nigerians are waiting to see what will come out of her move
and how
to the
events play out.
And we have more stories on the Nation. Economy attracts $8.5 billion in the first quarter, says NBS. We have all of that on the front page of the Nation. Let's see what Punch newspaper has for us on its front page.
The Punch newspaper is reporting this morning, Ruga can cause explosion. Wole Soyinka warns federal government. There's a quote by him. He says, I think that there is going to be trouble in this country if this Ruga thing is not handled imaginatively and with humanity as priority. Any country where cattle takes priority over life, over human life, is definitely at an elementary stage. Well, that statement was made by Professor Wole Soyinka himself to the federal government. Just above the masthead, the story here says, Oyo is technically bankrupt, says Makinde. The story is on page 9 of the Punch. Public Procurement Act encouraging corruption, says Senate President. That story is on page 3 of the Punch newspaper. Gas producers lament as power firms owe 1.3 trillion naira. That story is on page 33 of the Punch newspaper. There's a picture here. Officers of 16th Brigade Nigerian Army and corps members during routine sanitation in Pansia Markets, Yenugua, Bayelsa State. A laudable action by soldiers and corps members working together to clean up the environment. Just below that picture, a story is reporting federal government prosecutor Saraki says Atiku. That story is on page 9. Financial statements, NSC suspends trading in 11 firms' shares. That story is on page 35 of the Punch newspaper. I'll require a formidable cabinet for the task ahead. That's what's said by Buhari, and you can find the story on page 10 of the Punch. Computer programmer commits suicide after securing Canadian visa. That story is on page 4 and page 5. And finally, bad roads. We can't access 64 billion naira maintenance fund, says FEMA. That story is on page 31 of the Punch newspaper. Quite interesting stories, I must say, reported by the National Dailies this morning. Yeah, but that's all we can take because of time. Many thanks for joining us on the newspaper review segment this morning. Over now to Ibadan for the rest of the program. I am Folashade Ogurinde.
And I'm Faith Agbetuya. Join us tomorrow as we bring you up to speed with different issues reported on Nigerian dailies. Good morning.
Good morning.